how then do we get the graph of an equation? Now, as we go through our study of math, we'll learn many methods for generating the graphs of equations, for generating the graphs of specific kinds of equations, and for generating the graphs of equations in general. This most basic method is our very first, simplest way of trying to come up with the graph of an equation. This won't always capture all of the interesting features of a graph, but it will give us a basic idea of what the shape of the graph is. To get a basic idea for the shape of a graph, we simply make a large table of solutions to our equation, and then, using that table, graph each of the solutions that appears in the table, and finally, fill in the curve that those points appear to form. Now, the beauty of this method is that we can really use this for any old equation. In order to get an example of this method, I'm going to use a linear equation because that's going to be our primary graphing interest in this course. But we can use this for any equation. Alright, let's say we have the equation y equals 2x minus 1. I'm going to make a large table of solutions. Because of the form this equation is in, I see that it's going to be easier to choose x's, so I'm just going to choose a whole big list of x values. So now that I've chosen my x values, I find my y values. 2 times x, 2 times negative 4 is negative 8, minus 1 is negative 9. 2 times negative 3 minus 1, that's negative 6 minus 1, that's negative 7. 2 times negative 2 minus 1, that's negative 4 minus 1, that's negative 5. 2 times negative 1 minus 1, that's negative 2 minus 1, that's negative 3, and so on. So I get these y values: negative 9, negative 7, negative 5, negative 3, negative 1, 1, 3, 5, 7, by computing y for each of these x values. Okay, I want to draw a graph that shows each of these points. Notice that I figured out this table before I started to draw my graph. The reason that I did that is that I want to make sure now that when I make my graph, when I create my axes, my x's include all the numbers from negative 4 up to 4, and my y's include all the values from negative 9 up to 7. After I create my table of values, then I want to create my axes to show all of the values that I'm interested in. So let's see what happens when I do that. I'll draw my x-axis first to go from negative 4 up to 4, labeling the negative numbers, leaving a space for 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's my x-axis. Now I want my y-axis to go up to 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. and I want it to go down to -9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Notice that my set of axes ended up kind of tall and skinny. That's because I had a wider range of y values than I did of x values. And that's fine. That's totally a thing that happens. Right? You are allowed to draw your axes so they're taller than they are wide, or so they're wider than they are tall. Alright, so now I'm going to plot each of my points. X is -4, y is -9, going down from -4 to get to y is -9. That's my first point. X is -3, y is -7. X is -2, y is -5. X is -1, y is -3. X is 0, y is -1. X is 1, y is 1. X is 2, y is 3. X is 3, y is 5. X is 4, y is 7. Why could I do that so fast? Because I made this problem up and I already knew what this graph was going to look like, right? In general, we want to work very, very carefully when we go to plot our points. Okay. Also, in general, we won't necessarily want to write in the label for each point. It usually isn't necessary and it makes for a very cluttered picture. Okay, looking at this, I see that my points are all lined up with each other. I can go ahead and draw a straight line that goes through all of these points. The pattern that I see in this graph is that it's a straight line. Well, that's a coincidence. I had a linear equation, and then it turned out that my graph was a straight line. Is that a coincidence, or is something going on? In fact, something is going on here. We'll see in the next lesson what it is about these linear equations that means that their graph is a straight line. But this is just our most basic, most general method for graphing an equation. Just make a great big list of solutions, graph your solutions, and see what the picture looks like.